So in summer 2013, I came to Milton Keynes to the role of Pioneer Minister on the eastern area of Milton Keynes, two new housing estates, Broughton and Brooklands. There was no church community, there was no space to meet, and there was this whole new community to get to know. So I was arriving in the summer, and I started by along to coffee morning at the pavilion, to parent and toddler groups, to meeting the guy who ran the pub. And through meeting people, we began to think about starting a worshipping community, which is what I had been primarily to do. So at the Christmas of 2013, Church Without Walls was launched. And to be honest, I didn't know if we'd have one gathering and that'd be it, and nobody would come, and I think, okay, give it another year. And it was launched because I began to meet people who began to say, oh yeah, I'd quite like my kids to know a bit more about faith. I'd be quite interested in coming to something if there was something going on. And so we did Cafe Church Christingle, and for that very first event, I think we had 80 people just like bowled over in the function room at the pub. So we had Cafe Church, and we thought, right, okay, well, you can't stop. And so we started Dinner Church. So that was 2 Sundays a month. Dinner Church was when we met, we had a meal together, we shared communion, we had a talk. So then we had 2 gatherings. By spring 2015, we added Forest Church. And then just 2 weeks ago, we added a final 4th Sunday, which is Quiet Church.
It's like faith comes up a lot, I think, in a lot of our lives. When things sometimes aren't going right, sometimes it's just enough to have faith. I used to volunteer for a coffee morning at the Broughton Pavilion with another lady, and Ruth came along and introduced herself as the community minister. I remember when I spoke to Ruth at the coffee morning, I'd said that I had wanted to go to church, but I had very young children, and that I had tried to go to some churches with the young children, and children being as young as they are, I've got 3, they wouldn't sit still in the church, and I found it very awkward to be there, and I didn't know anyone else at the church, and it was just something I wanted to do, and I think Ruth was the key that opened the door to allow me and my family to go to church again.
For me, I feel I've made some really strong friendships. I feel like I'm part of a family when I come. It's just been very easy to keep coming.
It's wider than just you coming to one thing. There's something for us as adults that we do without our children.
Yes.
And it's still church related. And then there's the stuff that we do with the children. That I think that's what's kept me coming, because there is those parts of Church Without Walls that are also just for you.
Yes.
Those moments that you sometimes need.
How I ended up at Church Without Walls, I remember meeting Ruth at one of the family function days at the Broughton Pavilion. The rest is history, really. It's been a very enjoyable journey of faith for me, because I've learned a lot about my faith. What I liked was how Ruth would explain the stories within our, cafe church or dinner church, and it was just easy for me to hear it and just make sense of it. It was, I'm really grateful for that.
About 3 years ago, we were going to another church, but we felt quite strongly that God was saying it was time to leave that church. And so we were waiting to see what God wanted us to do next. And then we got a leaflet through the door where you were advertising the Christingle service and what was happening in our local community in this new church. And we thought, oh, and my heart really raced, and I thought, oh, is this what God has set us free for? So we came along to the Christingle service and just felt that, this was what God wanted us to be involved in. For me, some of the challenges and questions I keep asking myself is, what does it mean to be church in the 21st century in a new housing estate? And it's not like church has gone before. I grew up in quite a traditional Church of England and Methodist environment, and through our married life we've been to Church of England and Baptists. But what is church now in this day and age? And that's something that we keep on exploring together.
So we begin with a prayer. We come in these moments of quiet to God, full of our thoughts and emotions of the day. We come to still ourselves in God's presence, to reflect and listen and sift through our many ideas.
How did I end up coming to Church Without Walls? Well, originally it was when I was on maternity leave after having Adriana that I came round to yours for Talking Point, and then from there was when we organised Adriana's baptism, and then just been coming ever since, every Sunday. It's something different, because obviously my denomination is Dutch Reform, and I struggled to find a church here, and then just without walls, there was no boundaries. It was family friendly, and I didn't have to worry about my kids making a noise. It just really made me feel comfortable.
There have been an awful lot of highlights and moments when I've just gone, wow, that was just amazing. Lots of little things sometimes. Two big things, I suppose. We've had two big family baptisms over the last 12 months with mum and 3 kids, in both cases, all getting baptised. And those moments just go, wow, because that's nothing to do with me. That's about how God is working in people's lives. And even if sometimes, we won't say, oh, that's God working in our lives. When you sit and listen to the stories, I feel really humbled by the way that people's lives have been touched and changed. He took the cup saying, this is my blood of the new covenant, poured out for you. Do this whenever you drink it to remember it.
I guess I've been part of Church Without Walls now for 3 years, a bit less. We've lived in Milton Keynes for about 8 years. I work with Ruth as associate priest in Church Without Walls, and also as associate priest within the broader Walton Churches partnership, of which Church Without Walls is part. I think looking back over the 3 years that Church Without Walls has been in operation, there's been a remarkable development, both in terms of people's own spirituality and people's journeys in faith, but also in terms of giving a fresh community impetus to this new and growing area.
Well, I first met Ruth at a meeting for extra special families, which was like a children's centre, and it involved sort of messy play, and I went there with my little girl, and I got chatting to Ruth about Church Without Walls. My background in religion and faith is non-existent. Nobody in my family has ever gone to church. It was never mentioned. But Church Without Walls is not a ordinary church at all. It's much more casual. I had my daughter baptised. She's 5, and she absolutely loves coming. She really, really loves it, and every week she asks if we're going to church, and she's so pleased to come. And I do really want her to grow up to go to church and to believe in God and Jesus, and to be the sort of person that our friends are here.
We joined Fossil, Friends of St Lawrence.
We did, and we met Ruth through that. She came to the meetings.
Yes, several of the meetings, I think. And obviously Ruth was talking about Church Without Walls. It's evolved. Obviously, it's evolved, and different things have been coming. Developed, and because I don't work, for me, I was able to then come along to all the different activities like Knit, Natter and Sew, the soup and Talking Point and well, all the Sunday things, obviously, but also the community that's built up, the people
It's huge.
are just
Yeah.
lovely. They're just
Lovely
so
people.
kind and helpful, you know. It's just, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
There are certainly challenges to a church like this because we don't have very many established Christians. Actually, that's one of the real pleasures, to see so many people who have maybe had a little bit of church in their background, but we've got very few people who've decided to move churches to come here. And so in many ways we are reaching new people for the kingdom, and that's a real positive. And that's the challenge I think we face in the future, is we're bringing these people in, we're developing their faith, and how do we move it on from there?
We're now coming towards, well, I'll have been here 3 years this summer, and by Christmas, Church Without Walls will have been going for 3 years. And we're at the point where we begin to have to look to the future and say, what are our core values? What is the heart of who we are? How are we going to be sustainable? You know, we've been supported and funded by these local church communities, but how are we actually going to begin to grow up as a community and sort of take on some of those financial responsibilities, some of those practical responsibilities together? So this is an important moment, but a really exciting moment in our journey. And through it all, the most exciting thing is listening to people telling their stories about how becoming involved in faith, learning about Jesus, discovering God in their lives has touched them, has changed them, has made a difference in their lives. And that is at the heart of what it's all about.
What I love about Church Without Walls is that we can go anywhere and everywhere and turn this like non-religious place to something religious and sacred.